What I was surprised by over the course of my nearly 2 decades of homeschooling was that I wasn't just doing something to serve my kids or to create more freedom for us to travel as a family or to not have to wake up the kids so we could get ready for school, and all the many myriads of reasons why homeschooling has been an amazing lifestyle. But what I discovered is that as we took steps away from the conventional beaten homeschool path, we were not just stepping away from school. We were stepping away from ways of thinking that the culture and many of me or many people around me were agreeing to think about life and how we do life. And that was a surprise to me. This concept of deschooling, I don't know what it means to you when I say deschool. It means sometimes different things to different people because it's a word that is not even in Grammarly. I repeatedly use it when I'm writing on my website, capturingthecharmedlife.com. I write about deschooling a lot. I group coach, I one-on-one coach. I'm putting together a course for this purpose. And Grammarly doesn't recognize the word deschool. To me, in a nutshell, in a very simplified nutshell, I would say deschooling is coming away from all the things that we have taken as truth from the conventional world about what learning is and education and all those things, and come away from unhelpful mindsets that don't really help us in our homeschools. And so I feel like I'm still learning. I feel like I'm recognizing, especially because I'm focusing on it and writing it about it and helping other homeschool moms deschool. I'm actually aware that I'm still in process. I'm still learning how to come away from unhelpful mindsets that our culture has set for us. So, what's the connection then between deschooling and life purpose? I hope you can hear. When we come away from the things that don't really benefit us, that really don't set ourselves up for a meaningful life, that really don't help our kids become more them, we are moving towards the things that matter. And when we go towards the things that matter, the things that feel true, everything feels more expansive and free and purposeful, and we can lead a life of purpose. So last week I was interviewed on a podcast about a purpose and deschooling, and she asked me, did you already know this before you began your homeschool journey? And the answer is categorically, no, I did not know these things. I started my homeschool with my beautiful 4 kiddos that you can see in the corner there, in a little private school at home. Whatever I could do to create that private school that would be better than the private school that they began their early education in was my goal. Sit still, be quiet, open your little baby beaks so wide so mama can fill those little baby beaks, because I'm the mama bird, with the most important educational tidbits. That was my goal. And I was doing what I understood to be the best that I could do. And the way that I learned was the good old-fashioned difficult way, trial and error. My journey of deschooling really began by doing things conventionally. Private school at home. Kids not wanting to do what I'm offering them. Pushback, resistance, difficulty, complaining. And frankly, when I started watching my kids that were expected to sit down and do the routine that we had created, which I had so lovingly created and so eagerly wanted to share, I discovered that they did the work if they had to, but the relationship between me and them suffered. And then we would finally get through it, if we got through it. And then they would go and do their thing. And I would discover that they were still learning. And sometimes they were doing things like writing books or stories after my time with them, where I prescribed writing. And after a while, it just looked like a big old waste of time on my part to be trying so hard to create certain learning opportunities at the table where they were still learning anyways after they left the table. So that's where it really got clear for me, is just watching my kids learning and how they learned. And all four of those kiddos learn very differently, as I'm sure yours do too. It was some form of personal torture to force feed the baby beaks with these educational tidbits. Can I hear an amen? Some days feel like it goes really well, and other days feels really painful. But when I watch my kids learning despite my efforts, and when I found a book in a library on a lark called the how to fail a child, or how a child fails, by John Holt. I read that book. He is a 30-year education veteran, and he's passed on now, but he has left so many wonderful books that have helped homeschool community and really the education community understand that learning doesn't necessarily happen in a classroom. It doesn't necessarily happen in conventional ways. And that book and the things that I was observing with my kids helped me understand that maybe the approach that I lovingly intended toward my kids wasn't really that effective. Maybe there was a different way. So, what are some of the things that you might want to deschool from? Well, I'm going to talk about that in a moment. But first, I just want you to know there is support and guidance to have someone walk alongside you while you're deschooling, because you don't have to do it the good old fashioned trial and error way, but you can if you want to. You can have a lot more confidence and clarity and freedom and a greater sense of purpose if you have someone confidently, clearly walking alongside you. For us in our family, we have benefited in the deschool, really I don't even know that word when we first started, but working towards deschooling and self-directed learning, it has helped us become more self-determined. We have chosen to do certain things, like a whole bunch of travel in our homeschool years. My husband started a political campaign in the last few months. I have begun a small business here as a life coach. I podcast. It all started when I wrote a book about my homeschool experiences. I opened a bed and breakfast the summer before the pandemic. I built a home and a homestead, and now have baby goats arriving in a few weeks. Of course, what my life looks like and what your life looks like and what your goals are for your life and my goals for my life, they might not at all sound like something you would want. And that's not the point. Deschooling helps you to get clear on what matters to you, who you are, who your kids are, and what all of you are supposed to do and be on this planet for this time. That is the expansive power of deschooling. Imagine if your homeschool wasn't defined by what other people think that you should do in your homeschool. Imagine if you could take breaks and not always be productive, or that you didn't always have to have a new exposure to constant things, to extracurriculars that everybody else is doing, show up at co-op on the same day, same time, every season. Imagine if your kids didn't need to identify with a particular grade, or they didn't have to learn through textbooks or lectures or testing, or we didn't assume that kids had to learn certain things at certain times because they're at a certain age. Now imagine if we assumed kids typically are not at the same developmental level, because we can see it in our own home that kids are not at the same developmental level. Sometimes our 8-year-old is capable of something that our 12-year-old is capable of, and our 12-year-old can't do more than the 8-year-old. Sometimes we assume kids will be interested in things that we are interested in because we're interested in them. Also, something that's very familiar in a classroom. If the teacher's upbeat, then the kids will be excited by it, which sometimes is true, but not always true. Do we need to organize learning and create systems of learning? We're told we do, so don't we? We assume teachers need to be certified in order to engage their kids in their homeschool. We assume that we have to switch from the role of mother to the role of teacher, dependent on what we're discussing. We assume there are only certain times of the day that kids can learn. We assume that there's really only certain subjects that kids should learn and that are really considered learning. We assume that children don't know how they should be educated. We assume that kids don't naturally learn unless we lead and guide them. We assume that kids' emotional connection and attachment can be put on hold for 7 hours if they are in a school system. We assume that the most important people in a child's life are his peers. We assume that someone else, a prescribed system developed by the experts, those experts that know better than parents, should advocate for our children. There are so many other things that I speak about when I speak about what we could deschool from, and I feel like I'm still learning. And all of this, if you imagine your kids in your homeschool living a life outside of the things that we assume, what would your life look like? What would your homeschool look like? I'm guessing it would be more free, more individualized, and more purposeful. It often means that you're going to have to practice learning, to let go of control. What does learning really look like through your child's eyes? I have come to believe that we intend good towards our kids, and we are on a learning growth curve just like they are, differently, but we are too. So there's nothing wrong with the way we engage in education. It's just that, is it really serving the child in front of us? Since I did do a classical homeschool in the beginning years, we did Latin, and I remember looking at the root word of education. It was educato, if I'm pronouncing that right. Educato means to raise up. To raise up what? What's the intention of the education? It's to what? Raise up a classroom of 24, 25 kids? Is it to raise up an institution, or is it to raise up your specific kids in your home? And if that be so, then how should it look? Should it not look individualized and focused on the people in your home? Letting go of control, though, is tricky. Ask me how I know. I have heard it from many homeschool moms, their stories of what it was like to let go of control, also of allowing for a more child-led education, or to also learn how to incorporate you sharing the things that mean something to you that you want to share with your kids, because you get to do that too. Or you get to decide whatever it is you're homeschooling. So you get to decide what you're including in your homeschool, how you're raising up your kids, and what's serving them and serving you. I want to share 2 stories about this concept. One is about how I learned to address gaps, because there's always a discussion on, but what about gaps? I have yet to meet any human being that has gone through any form of learning, whether it's unschooling or conventional education, you name the process or the educational path, everyone has gaps. Just last week, I was chatting with Amy Otto from the Homeschool Compass podcast, and she was sharing with me that her son had a curiosity about fire. And they learned that there is more than one state of matter. We know that because we assume that there's 3 states of matter, but I did not know that you could also have a state of matter called plasma, fire as plasma. That was new to me. So it turns out I had a gap. Also, when I was sitting in a Ghanaian village, when we were traveling as a homeschool family, I was sitting with a 16-year-old boy and showing him pictures of our home in the snow, and he'd never seen snow before. And he was giggling that he thought it was funny. I thought it was hot where we were because it was winter for them. It was stifling hot for me as a Canadian. And he thought that was funny. And he was so surprised to learn that I didn't know when Ghana was under its own domain or rule and no longer under English rule in about 1964, 1969, something. I didn't know. He was flummoxed. How did you not know that? Because I'll tell you why. Where I grew up in Canada, we didn't talk about that. That wasn't a discussion point. So it turns out I have bajillions of gaps, so many gaps, and every single person does. I don't think an education is about making sure we don't have any gaps. But what do you think an education is? Because what you think really does matter. I also learned from a mom who is just on the cusp of beginning her new homeschool journey. She shared with me that she has two kids, one kid that really wants to homeschool. And she was sharing with me her experience of letting go, of allowing her kids to learn the way they learn. She shared this. Imagine a story where me attempting to get my girls to make a research poster on salmon when they were in about grade 3 or 4. We went to the library, got the books, tried to get the kids to read said books, then tried to get them interested in creating a cool, informative poster. I was trying to force feed them the formula of learning the way that I'd been taught. Or that also didn't work for me, ironically, but it's the way that I knew. Then we went down to the creek afterward that runs through our property, only to discover salmon in it, and that they already knew all the stuff I was trying to teach them, my kids. They taught me everything about the life cycle of a salmon that day. It was her surprising journey to discover her kids were learning outside a conventional approach. It was the way that I allowed myself to accept that gaps exist, accept that my kids, the way they learn, isn't the way that I necessarily learn myself. There's so many different elements of letting go that we can do as homeschool parents. And really, we're deschooling ourselves. Letting go equals deschooling. And letting go means you're more likely to walk towards freedom and purpose and individualization in your homeschool. So can you? Can you redefine an education and build a life on purpose? I have a few questions for you, so grab your journal and a pen or pause this video and get ready to answer a few questions. Let's call it Homeschool Mama homework. I always think that's funny because I've always leaned on the side of self-directed education and haven't given my kids homework, but I'm going to give you some homework. So here's some questions. What's your long-term goal in your home education? What do you believe is an education anyway? What was your relationship to education before you had kids? What was the baggage you had from your education? What were the things you were taught about what an education is? What were the benefits that you gained in your education? What do you know about your kids right now? How they learn? Maybe where they're going. And when do you think they should start living their lives on purpose? Is it when they're 18 and graduated? Is it at summertime after they're finished their school? Should they be living their lives on purpose by the time they're 35, or when they have maybe decided to retire at 65 or 70? Answer these questions to help you get clear on what you believe in education is and also what a purposeful life is. Here's a few difficulties and frustrations in the deschooling process that both I've experienced and other people have experienced. And I'm not covering the gamut here. I'm just going to share 3. One is this internal perfectionism thing that we mothers really forget homeschool, forget anything related to home education, just moms. We want to do things perfectly for our kids, even though we know we don't, but we want to be perfect. And if we take on this role as a homeschool mom to do that realm of their lives too, to offer an education in a whole different way, We want to make sure we don't miss anything. That is definitely what I was doing in the first 3 or 4 years of my homeschool. I didn't want to miss a beat. I'm going to tell you something. You don't want to hear it, but I'm just going to put it out there. It's not possible for you to do it perfectly. You will come to the end of your parenting days and say, I didn't quite do it the way that I thought I would. If you haven't already figured that out by now, because you probably have, unless you maybe have a kiddo that's 2 or 3 and you're still in that idealistic parenting phase that you can do it all right. But you're probably going to come to a point where you realize you really can't do this perfectly. You can't. You're on a growth trajectory just like they are, except you're learning right alongside your children if you are their home educating parent. The second thing that I want to share is that when you're going through this deschool process, especially in the earlier parts of your deschooling, you're asking yourself, yeah, but doesn't that just mean I'm going to give my kids so much space and freedom that they're going to be lazy? They're going to live a lazy life and nothing of what they do will amount to anything. And I do understand that feeling. I have been there. I have experienced that and was very surprised to discover it was just exactly the opposite. Oftentimes, I think the reason that we're concerned about that question is because that's kind of what's happening when kids come home from school, or if they've been in a system for long enough, they are having things dished out to them. They're expected to engage in certain things at certain times of the day, and then sometimes bring it home and do homework too. And they're engaging in topics or subjects that they don't really care about, or doing projects or whatever, because even if they don't care, and they're constantly being given things that they don't care about. And that's the key. They don't care. When kids are given swaths of time to do things that they want to do, they do interesting things. They do very interesting things. And they are most definitely not necessarily the things that you think are the really interesting things. I still marvel that I have a child that loves competitive chess. If you know me, you would know those genetics do not come from me. They definitely do not. Or I have a kiddo that is presently pre-professional ballet. She is in a ballet program across the country. Or I've got a kiddo who loves ancient history and is doing a double major in ancient history, Latin, even though I unschooled her in after our very serious private school time. She's doing Latin, ancient history, and psychology. All of these kids are very different and are doing things because it's an extension of who they are, not an extension of who I am and what I think they should be. They're building a life on purpose, not a lazy life. And the third thing that I would say is that when we're going through the deschooling process, we're often concerned what other people think. And you can be, because other people think, why? Why are you doing this? This is crazy. This is not what everybody else is doing. And then they'll give you the series of questions that they're concerned about. And sometimes people don't really care, actually. They don't really care. They're not really being critical of you. Sometimes it doesn't really matter to them what you make as a choice. They're just surprised by it. And sometimes it does matter to them, and they really love your kids and they're concerned. And it's because they love them that they're concerned, not because they're just looking at you criticizing most of the time. However, no matter what they think, your choices to decide how you're going to live your life, it's your choice. You don't have to live your life through the eyes of what other people think. And though that definitely requires us to strengthen our internal muscles, I would tell you that's part of the big picture in this discussion today, that's exactly my point, is that you grow to live your life on your own terms intentionally. You are assessing, does this really matter? Should I really be doing what I'm doing? Not what does everybody else think about what I'm doing? And you become so much more focused on what you want to do, how you want to live your life on purpose. And so actually, it's a benefit, not a disadvantage. You get to redefine education. You get to decide what a purposeful life is. And I encourage you to do a little more homeschool mama homework. Ask yourself, what is your vision? What are the values that are guiding your choices? Your values that are deciding how you home educate, how you parent, how you live your life. And then create space to try to incorporate some of that. You'll discover that you have so much more space to live your life on purpose. I see 5 benefits to deschooling our homeschool and our lives. The first thing is that obviously we simplify our lives. We delete a whole bunch of stuff that doesn't really matter. We have more time. We focus on the things that actually align with our values. The activities of our homeschool and the activities of our home aligns with our value. Our routine aligns with our value. Our routine is defined by our family, not defined by other people. We have more time. We're more present. We're enjoying our lives more because we're more present. Overall, everyone is developing more fully the social elements, the emotional elements, the emotional regulation, or all the different elements of a human. We have more time to focus on the things that matter most. We simplify our homeschools and our lives. The second thing that I see is that we enable boundaries. Boundaries with people, clarifying where we end and where they start, recognizing that they may have different values that we have. They may see the world differently. They may want different things for their family. They may want different things for their community, but we might not want that. Deschooling, I think, helps us become more us and gets clearer on who we aren't. We don't do what other people are doing. We don't do things that other people want us to do for them, for their terms. We do things on purpose and we become confident in our choices. So deschooling helps us to enable our boundaries. And along with boundaries is identity. Our identity clarifies who we are, really why we're here on the planet. We get clearer on what the reasons are. It gets stronger. We become more authentic. We live our lives intentionally in both our experiences and in the way that we engage learning, and we do it authentically, and we help our kids do exactly the same, which is more autonomous. We become more us. We own who we are. We own what we should be educating our children with or how we should be educating our children. We own our lives. We help our kids and we also follow our natural curiosities. We develop critical thinking skills. We encourage problem solving and decision making more deeply. We more deeply understand ourselves and we more deeply understand our kids. We develop our identities. That is the third benefit of deschooling. The fourth is the purpose angle. I think that we can rediscover purpose in a whole new way, one that feels aligned with our authentic selves, that isn't aligned with what other people think. We can step away from really more than one system. It's not just the education system, but we step away from systematized approaches to thinking. We step away from tradition and then discover who we are. And who we are always has a reason. We're here on this planet, 1 in 7 billion people, uniquely, purposefully, you are here. Why? Why are you here? Why are you here on the planet today? We can become more focused in our life intentions, in all the activities that we do. It obviously feels more expansive that way. It feels a whole bunch more alive. We feel more free, and everything we feel and experience when it's free and expansive is what we're going to be teaching our kids to do. We're naturally doing it. We don't even have to try because more is caught than taught. We're teaching our kids to live more purposefully and intentionally. And the last and final thing that I would suggest to you here as a benefit to deschooling is that we are teaching our kids to love learning. There is always a discussion about lifelong learning. We want our kids to be lifelong learners. And I would suggest to you that we don't actually have to teach them that. We just have to get out of their way so they can do it, because we're all lifelong learners if we're fully engaged with life. We want our kids to be positively, intrinsically motivated. We want them to learn how to really follow those curiosities, know how to play, know how to make something meaningful out of life based on who they really are. And if we want to do that, we need to get out of their way, see who they really are, encourage who they really are, facilitate opportunities to become more them, create an environment that is that love of learning. We keep pursuing learning, then they will keep pursuing learning. Isn't that amazing that we have this opportunity as homeschool families? We've already stepped off the beaten path. Let's step off the conventional homeschool path too. I invite you to live your homeschool life with greater intention and clarity so you can embrace freedom and purpose in your homeschool life. You can connect with me at my website, www.capturingthecharmedlife.com. In the upper right-hand corner is a search bar. If you type Deschool into that search bar, you're going to learn a whole bunch more about how I think about it and how it can benefit you. I guide other people's journeys in a variety of ways. You can learn more about that if you just book a consultation with me. You'll see the button is on the top third of the website, and book a consultation with me to learn how you could do coaching. Maybe there's a course that you could access, but there is most definitely a 5-day Deschool Your Homeschool Challenge that everyone can experience, and the link should be down below. When you do that, you are moving towards that freedom and purpose for your homeschool and your life. I want to share with you 3 people's experiences that have worked with me and how it has helped build more purpose and intention and more peace and ease in their lives. Diane is someone that is also a life coach, has been a homeschool mom she has 3 kids over the past couple decades. And she says, let's face it, homeschooling is hard and amazing. There is elation and devastation all in the course of an average day. Teresa comes alongside to help you navigate your relationship with homeschooling, not to fix you, but to sufficiently assist you in detaching your identity from the activity so that, in fact, the activity is elated and elevated to new heights. So why do homeschool coaching? Teresa helps you poke through your assumptions and inner narrative to help you parent and educate intentionally, not only for your kids, but also for yourself. She matches your pace to co-create sustaining practices for life and the long haul. Beautifully said, Diane. That is exactly what I've always wanted to do, and that is what I do with other homeschool moms. I do homeschool life coaching in a variety of ways, and when it comes to discussing boundaries, dealing with our big emotions, dealing with our identity challenges and our life purpose. And I want to share with you what Carla has said. She says, Teresa is the real deal. An experienced homeschool mom who's been there and can help others get out of overwhelm and their internal challenges. Her ability to hold space for silence and difficult feelings makes her no small talk approach so effective. I trust her. Her retreat, her resources, and her Ask Me Anything meetings have served me tremendously. I'm so glad she's in my corner. And I have been honored to walk alongside Carla. And this is not a made-up name. This is a real person, a homeschool mom of 2 kids, one that she happens to be homeschooling right now. And I also have a mention from someone, I don't know the exact name, it says SJ News Paper File. And she says, I'm new to homeschooling, but not new to parenting. And boy, oh boy, could I have used daily doses of Teresa years ago. She's listening to my podcast. I love the focus of self-care for mamas because in caring for ourselves, asking for help, saying no, setting boundaries, you'll have to listen to Teresa and read her book to get the full list. And in return, we can give more love to those around us. Happy mom, happy family. Thank you for putting out some terrific content. You are a blessing to your listening mamas and their families. And I could keep going, but that would be rather gratuitous, don't you think? You could also find them on my website, pod page, podcast, all the things. But I tell you that because I work with real homeschool moms to overcome their challenges. And deschooling your homeschool is one that it just gives you so much more space to live your life on purpose. So if you're interested, if you're curious, connect with me. Over my 2 decades plus of mothering and homeschooling 4 kids, I gradually learned to deschool. FYI, that term deschooling, it wasn't even a thing when I started homeschooling. I would have described this experience in different language. If you've heard me share that story about how I started my homeschool, that it felt like some sort of self-torture, and frankly, pretty sure the kids thought so too. Requiring my kids to sit still and just be quiet and open their baby brain beaks and widely open it so that I could force feed things in, AKA an education. Well, that was my early story of homeschooling, and it has transformed over the years. Not to be dramatic or anything, but I really did feel like my version of school at home was just force feeding my baby birdies. If someone could have walked alongside me, challenged my notions of what an education was anyway, and what was I doing with all of this? What was my intention? What's my values? What actually do I value? How do I want to live? Helped me get clear on whether my approach was even working. Was it working for me or my kids? I would have enjoyed my homeschool a whole lot more. Can I hear an amen? I also would not have felt like I was pushing a boulder uphill, AKA my 4 kids. Some of them were bigger boulders than others. And I would have been at ease and peace as we followed our path, the path we were meant to walk, as I trusted myself and my kids more. I did figure this all out, mostly, but I figured it out the hard way. It took a whole lot of boulder pushing, frustration, hitting the wall of my own unrealistic expectations with my kids when I told them to sit still, be quiet, and open your baby brain beaks. Not a direct quote, but you get the idea. When I did learn to let go, after I read John Taylor Gatto and John Holtz and a variety of other Johns and other great J's, Judy Arnell, Julie Bogart, and many other authors, and with a whole lot of trial and error and a whole lot of contemplation about what unhelpful mindsets I might not want to be thinking anymore, I discovered that I had a homeschool lifestyle accompanied by a whole lot more freedom, purpose, and individualization. My story of deschooling brought my family a whole lot more freedom and purpose. And I think your story can transform. You can reimagine your homeschool life too. So you can live your life on purpose too. I look forward to connecting with you.